The desert stretched endlessly beneath a sky that seemed to burn with a merciless sun. Dry grass clung stubbornly to patches of sand, and the wind carried with it the dry scent of dust and rusting metal. Along an abandoned highway, the remnants of a ghost town stood frozen in time, its buildings tilting like weary old men who had lived far too long. The heart of this place, once alive with music, laughter, and the clink of glasses, was now nothing more than a sagging structure with a faded sign, Callahan's Saloon. Ethan Miller pressed his palms against the steering wheel, staring at the building with something close to reverence. "There it is," he whispered, his voice tight with both excitement and disbelief. Beside him, Claire shifted in her seat. Her dark hair clung to her neck in the heat and her lips curved in a hesitant line. "It looks worse than the pictures online," she muttered, her tone caught between concern and awe. "It's perfect," Ethan replied, unable to tear his eyes away. This is history just waiting to be brought back to life. The ghost town of Dry Creek had been empty for nearly a century, abandoned when the mines dried up and the promises of fortune faded. Most people had forgotten it even existed, but Ethan wasn't most people. A former history teacher turned writer, he had longed to find a place where forgotten stories lingered in the walls. Claire, an interior designer with an eye for renewal, had agreed to follow him on this reckless dream, though her agreement came with a cautious heart. The couple stepped out of their truck, the ground crunching beneath their boots. The silence was absolute, broken only by the whine of the wind slipping through broken window panes. Claire wrapped her arms around herself and looked at the town's remains, collapsed storefronts, a church with its steeple leaning precariously, a sheriff's office with its sign cracked in two. "It feels wrong," she admitted softly. Ethan reached for her hand, squeezing it with quiet reassurance. "It feels like opportunity. People travel across the country to see places like this. Imagine a restored saloon, authentic, breathing again. It could be the heartbeat of this town's second life." Claire studied his face, catching the spark in his eyes. It was the same spark that had made her fall in love with him years ago, his belief that the past wasn't dead, just waiting for someone to listen. Against her unease, she smiled faintly. "Then I guess we've got a lot of work to do." And so began their journey into Dry Creek, a journey that promised far more than fresh paint and polished wood. Because some stories weren't waiting to be told, they were waiting to be uncovered, and sometimes they were better left buried. Before diving deeper into what Ethan and Claire would soon discover, let me ask you something. If you're drawn to hidden histories, untold stories, and journeys that test the courage of those who dare chase them, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There are countless tales waiting in the forgotten corners of America, and this is just the beginning. Ethan and Claire pushed open the saloon doors, their hinges screaming in protest. Inside, dust floated in the air like restless spirits. The bar, long stripped of bottles, leaned at an angle, its surface scarred by years of neglect. Broken chairs lay scattered, poker chips buried in dirt near what was once a gaming table. Faded photographs still clung to the back wall, their faces blurred but hauntingly present. Claire walked slowly, fingertips brushing over the warped wood. "It feels like people just left in the middle of living," she murmured. "That's because they probably did," Ethan said, crouching to pick up a rusted coin. His voice was thick with fascination. "This isn't just wood and nails, it's memory. And we're going to give it a voice again." The floor groaned beneath them as they moved deeper into the room. Claire tried to ignore the chill crawling across her skin, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were listening, waiting, and somewhere beneath their feet, locked away in shadows they had yet to uncover, history was holding its breath. The following morning, Ethan and Claire drove into the nearest small town, Carson Ridge, to gather supplies. The town sat about 30 miles from Dry Creek, and it was the last place where gas stations, grocery stores, and hardware shops still kept the desert from swallowing civilization whole. The streets were calm, lined with brick storefronts that looked as though they hadn't changed in decades. A diner sat at the corner, its neon sign buzzing faintly, while a general store across the street carried just about everything from canned beans to fence posts. Claire glanced out the window, her arms folded. It feels strange, she said softly, watching a group of older men playing checkers on the porch of the feed store. Like everyone here knows something we don't. Ethan chuckled, trying to lighten her tone. That's small-town life. They're probably wondering who the newcomers are. They parked outside the hardware store, the dry heat hitting them as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Inside, the smell of dust, wood shavings, and motor oil filled the air. Shelves sagged with tools, nails, and paint cans, while a large fan hummed lazily overhead. The shopkeeper, a man with weathered skin and a baseball cap pulled low, greeted them with a polite nod. "Morning. What can I help you folks find?" Ethan smiled warmly. "We just bought the old saloon out in Dry Creek. Looking to pick up some cleaning supplies, lumber, maybe a couple of power tools to get started." The man froze. His eyes flicked up sharply from the counter. "You said Dry Creek?" "Yes, sir," Ethan replied confidently. "Callahan's saloon. It's been sitting empty a long time. We're going to restore it." A silence settled. The hum of the fan seemed louder as the man exchanged a quick look with a younger clerk stocking shelves in the back. Claire noticed it immediately, the way their expressions tightened, the way their friendliness dimmed. Finally, the shopkeeper muttered, "That place is trouble. Best you stay clear of it." Claire's heart skipped, a chill sliding down her spine. She stepped closer to Ethan, whispering, "See, I told you this feels off." Ethan forced a smile, unwilling to back down. "We appreciate the concern, but we've already signed the papers. It's ours now." The shopkeeper shook his head, muttering under his breath, then said louder, "Folks round here don't go near Dry Creek. There's nothing there worth saving." Claire studied the man's face. His eyes weren't filled with judgment. They were filled with something heavier, almost fear. She swallowed hard, glancing at Ethan, silently pleading with him to reconsider, but Ethan pressed on. "Well, we'll still need supplies, so how about you show me where the lumber's at?" The man sighed, resigned, and waved toward the back. As Ethan followed him, Claire lingered near the counter, her fingers nervously tapping the wood. The younger clerk approached her quietly. His voice dropped low, barely above a whisper. "You should convince him to leave it alone," he said. "Bad things happen there, things nobody talks about. That saloon should have stayed buried." Claire's chest tightened. "What things?" she asked, her voice hushed. The young man shook his head, his lips pressed in a thin line. "Just get out while you can." Then he walked away, leaving her with her pulse racing and questions swirling in her mind. When Ethan returned with his arms full of supplies, he found her pale and unsettled. "What's wrong?" he asked, concerned. She forced a smile, shaking her head. "Nothing. Just tired, I guess." But inside, unease gnawed at her. As they loaded their truck and drove back toward Dry Creek, the desert stretched before them again, endless, silent, and waiting. Ethan hummed softly, already dreaming of fresh paint and the glow of lanterns hanging once more in Callahan's saloon. But Claire sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the horizon, the clerk's whispered warning repeating in her mind. And though Ethan saw only promise, Claire felt the first real stirrings of dread. The following days settled into a rhythm of hard labor beneath the scorching Nevada sun. Ethan and Claire rose early each morning, pulling on gloves and work boots before stepping into the saloon with determination. Dust clung to the air so thickly that every breath tasted of wood rot and sand. Each creak of the warped floorboards echoed in the emptiness, a reminder that this building had stood in silence for nearly a century. Ethan attacked the project with unshakable enthusiasm. He hauled broken chairs into piles, scraped years of grime from the counters, and pried loose boards from the walls. His eyes gleamed whenever he unearthed something, an old poker chip wedged between floorboards, a rusted lantern, or a cracked whiskey bottle still faintly smelling of its past contents. To him, each item was a treasure, proof that the saloon wasn't dead but only sleeping. Claire moved more cautiously. She polished glass until it reflected light again, swept mountains of dust into sacks, and tried to imagine how she might breathe warmth back into this hollow place. Her designer's mind searched for possibilities, how the wood could be sanded, how lanterns could glow once more, how visitors might someday step inside and feel the thrill of history. Yet the deeper she looked, the more oppressive the shadows seemed. One afternoon, Claire stood by the back wall, brushing cobwebs away from a photograph still pinned in place. The image was so faded it was nearly invisible, but a group of men in wide-brimmed hats could still be seen gathered around a card table. Their faces were blurred, but their postures carried an air of arrogance, like men who ruled not only the saloon, but the lives of those who entered it. A chill crept down her spine. "Ethan," she called softly. He straightened from where he was stacking broken wood near the doorway. "What is it?" She pointed to the photograph. "Do you ever feel like they're still watching? Like this place doesn't want to be changed?" Ethan walked over, squinting at the faded picture. He gave a short laugh. "They're long gone, Claire. All that's left is dust and us. That's the beauty of it. We get to give these walls a second life." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know if they want it." He kissed her forehead quickly, as though brushing off her unease. "That's because you're looking at ghosts. I'm looking at history." Still, as she turned away, she couldn't shake the feeling that history and ghosts weren't so different here. Day by day, progress grew visible. They scrubbed until the wood beneath the grime revealed its grain again. They swept until the air no longer choked with dust. They set aside artifacts for cataloguing: rusty revolver shells, glass shards, fragments of ledgers so water-damaged they barely held ink. Ethan insisted on photographing everything, his mind already spinning with ideas for exhibits. One evening, as the sun slipped low and painted the desert in shades of copper and violet, the couple sat on the saloon's porch with two folding chairs. Their clothes were streaked with dirt, their hands raw with blisters, but their eyes reflected the glow of a dream taking shape. Claire leaned back, sighing. "It's exhausting, but it's starting to feel possible." Ethan grinned, his face glowing with satisfaction. "Exactly, this place is going to be incredible. You'll see." But even as he spoke, Claire's gaze wandered back to the dark interior behind them. The saloon was cleaner, brighter than when they'd first arrived, yet it still seemed to hold its breath, as though waiting for something they had not yet uncovered. And while Ethan saw only progress, Claire felt the faint stir of unease growing stronger. Like a whisper beneath the floorboards neither of them had chosen to hear. Nights in Dry Creek carried a stillness unlike anywhere Ethan and Claire had ever lived. The desert wind whistled through cracks in broken walls, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dust. Coyotes called in the distance, their cries sharp and lonely, echoing across the empty valley. Inside the saloon, the couple often sat with lanterns lit, their shadows stretching across the bare walls as they planned the next stage of restoration. But with every night that passed, the atmosphere grew heavier. Claire was the first to notice. The creaks in the floor seemed louder when darkness settled. A loose shutter slammed hard even on windless evenings, and sometimes, when she woke in the middle of the night, she swore she heard the faint murmur of voices below, like men speaking in hushed tones far beneath the floorboards. One morning, after a restless night, Claire walked slowly across the saloon with a broom in her hand. As she swept near the back, her foot struck a spot on the floor that gave a dull, hollow sound. She frowned, setting the broom aside, and pressed down with her boot. The wood shifted slightly. "Ethan," she called, her voice tight. He appeared from the front doorway carrying a toolbox. "What is it?" "Listen," she said, tapping her foot on the spot again. Ethan crouched, knocking on the warped boards, his eyes lit with curiosity. "That's hollow. There's something under here." Together they cleared away dust and debris. Claire's hands trembled as she brushed aside layers of dirt to reveal the edges of a square panel wider than a door, built flush into the floor. When Ethan tugged at it, he found iron chains looped across, secured by a heavy lock. Claire's breath caught. The wood surrounding the panel was brittle and aged, but the lock gleamed strangely newer, as though someone had reinforced it decades later. "Why would anyone keep this sealed?" she whispered. Ethan's voice carried excitement rather than fear. "Because whatever's down there is part of the story. Maybe it's storage, maybe old whiskey barrels, hidden during Prohibition. Can you imagine what we could find?" Claire shook her head, her chest tightening. "Or maybe it's locked for a reason. Ethan, this feels wrong. We don't even know what's under there." He studied the lock, already pulling a screwdriver from his toolbox to test its strength. Exactly, we don't know, and that's why we need to open it. Her hand shot out, gripping his wrist. Please. Not yet. Can't we just focus on what's up here? Finish cleaning. Paint the walls. This cellar, it scares me. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. He looked into her eyes, saw the genuine fear pooling there, and his features softened. All right, we don't have to rush. He stood, setting the screwdriver aside. We'll leave it for now. But as he turned away, Claire could see the spark of obsession had already taken root in him. His mind was spinning, questions multiplying faster than answers. And she knew, despite his promise, that curiosity would eventually pull him back to that locked panel. That night, the saloon seemed colder than usual. Claire lay awake on their makeshift mattress, staring at the wooden ceiling while Ethan slept soundly beside her. She listened to the creaks, the sigh of the wind, and that faint, almost imperceptible whisper from beneath the floorboards. It might have been her imagination, but it was enough to send shivers across her skin. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and shut her eyes. But the thought returned again and again, louder each time. Whatever lay sealed beneath that trapdoor had not been meant to see the light again. By the third week, Ethan's restlessness had grown too sharp to ignore. The trapdoor lingered in his thoughts every waking moment. He could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice. Every nail hammered into place, every plank of wood cleaned, was just another step closer to the question burning inside him. What lay beneath? So when they ran out of supplies, he seized the excuse to drive back into Carson Ridge. Claire accompanied him. Though she sensed his real purpose wasn't just buying tools, the sky was cloudless, the Nevada sun relentless as it beat down on the highway. Inside the hardware store, the cool shade offered momentary relief. Ethan strode straight to the back, gathering heavy tools, bolt cutters, crowbars, reinforced gloves. Claire watched from the aisle, unease prickling her skin. She recognized what those tools were meant for, and the knot in her stomach tightened. At the counter, Ethan placed the items down with a determined smile. Need these for some old repairs. The shopkeeper, Henry Dawson, eyed the tools, then looked up sharply. Repairs, huh? Or locks? His voice carried a weight that silenced the room. Ethan hesitated only a second before answering. We found a cellar in the saloon, locked tight. We're going to open it. The color drained slightly from Henry's weathered face. He leaned across the counter, his gaze locked onto Ethan's. Don't. Claire stiffened at the force in his tone. Ethan frowned, trying to laugh it off. It's part of the restoration. We can't just ignore... Henry cut him off. That saloon was sealed for a reason. People back then didn't waste effort on nothing. If you've got sense, you'll leave it be. Claire stepped forward, her voice trembling. What happened there? Henry's jaw tightened. His eyes flickered as though replaying memories he'd rather bury. Finally he muttered, trouble, the kind that leaves stains deeper than any paint can cover. My granddad worked those mines when Dry Creek still had breath in it. He told stories about Callahan's place, stories no child should have heard. People went missing, debts never settled. And the ones who asked too many questions stopped asking altogether. The younger clerk, who had warned Claire before, shifted nervously in the background, confirming Henry's words with his silence. Ethan crossed his arms, stubbornness flaring. With respect, sir, history deserves to be uncovered, even the ugly parts. That's why we're there. To tell the truth, not bury it. Henry's hand slammed the counter, making Claire jump. His voice cracked with intensity. Truth has teeth, son. You think you can control it, but it bites back. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. The shop fell silent except for the creak of the fan overhead. Claire's heart pounded, fear tightening around her ribs. Ethan held Henry's gaze, refusing to back down, though a flicker of unease shadowed his eyes. Henry finally exhaled, his shoulders sagging. I can't stop you. But don't say you weren't warned. He pushed the tools across the counter with a weary hand, as though passing judgment. Back in the truck, Claire clutched the receipt tightly, her fingers trembling. Did you hear him? Ethan, this isn't just superstition. He was terrified. Ethan started the engine, jaw clenched. He's clinging to old legends. That doesn't mean we should. Whatever's down there, it's not going to hurt us. It's just history. Claire stared out the window, the desert blurring past. Yet Henry's words clung to her mind like burrs. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. And in the silence that followed, she realized a choice was looming, one that would soon test not just their dream, but their very strength as a couple. The ride back to Dry Creek was quiet, filled only with the steady hum of the truck engine and the crunch of tires on gravel. Claire stared at the horizon, her thoughts tangled. Henry's warning replayed in her mind, every word dripping with unease. Ethan, however, kept his eyes fixed on the road, jaw set with the determination she knew too well. He had already made up his mind. When they arrived, the desert air hung thick with heat. Ethan unloaded the new tools, lining them carefully on the saloon's porch, as if they were instruments waiting for the moment of performance. Claire lingered inside, dusting the counter with a rag that shook in her hands. Finally she spoke, her voice breaking the silence. "Ethan, please don't open that cellar." He froze, glancing back at her. "Claire?" "No," she interrupted, her tone sharper than she intended. "Listen to me. Henry wasn't just spinning tales. You saw his face. He was afraid." "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Of course it does, but fear doesn't erase history. If anything, it proves there's something down there worth finding." Claire slammed the rag onto the counter, frustration flooding her chest. "You're not hearing me. I'm saying we don't need to know what's under there. Claire came here to build something new, not to dig up every dark secret this place buried." His voice hardened. "And what kind of restoration ignores the truth? If we cover it up, we're no better than the people who sealed it in the first place." Her eyes burned with anger. "This isn't about truth, it's about safety. You're obsessed, Ethan. And it's scaring me." The word obsessed cut deeper than she intended. Ethan's expression tightened, his jaw clenching as he turned away. For a moment, silence pressed between them like a heavy wall. He finally said, quieter this time, "I can't just walk away, not when we're this close, don't you understand? This is what I've dreamed of, finding something real, something no one else has touched in decades. This could put Dry Creek back on the map. It could put us on the map." Claire's throat tightened. "And if it destroys us in the process? What then?" Ethan turned back to her, eyes softening. "It won't. We'll face whatever it is together. You have to trust me." She shook her head, tears welling. "I do trust you, Ethan. That's the problem. I trust you enough to know you won't stop until you've broken that lock, and I can already feel something waiting down there, something that doesn't want to be found." The wind rattled the broken windows as her words hung in the air. Ethan reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder, but she stepped back. The distance between them had never felt wider. He swallowed hard, forcing steadiness into his voice. "We don't have to decide tonight. Let's get some rest. We'll talk in the morning." Claire nodded faintly, though her chest was heavy with unspoken fears. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could still turn back. But when she glanced toward the back of the saloon, she saw the tools gleaming in the dim light, ready and waiting. And she knew Ethan's words about waiting until morning were nothing more than a pause before the inevitable. The next morning, the sky was washed in pale gold, the desert waking slowly under the weight of another relentless sun. Ethan rose early, restless, as though the lock in the saloon's floor had been whispering to him all night. Claire stirred beside him, heavy-eyed from broken sleep, and the first thing she noticed was the absence of his warmth. She found him already at the back of the saloon, crouched over the trap door with tools spread neatly around him. Her heart sank. "Ethan," she called softly, her voice edged with both warning and fatigue. He looked up, sweat already streaking his brow, though the day had barely begun. "I've been thinking all night. If we leave this untouched, it'll gnaw at us forever. We can't restore this place while pretending that Cellar doesn't exist." Claire wrapped her arms around herself, the weight of dread pressing deeper. And if Henry was right? If it was sealed for a reason? Ethan stood, gripping the bolt cutters, his jaw tightened. "Then we'll finally know. I can't live on what-ifs." The first snap of metal against the chain rang out like a gunshot in the hollow saloon. The lock resisted, groaning as though it too wanted to remain unbroken. Claire winced at every clang of steel, every grunt of effort. Dust rose from the floorboards as Ethan wrestled with the chains, determination burning in his eyes. At last, with a sharp crack, the lock split. The chain slithered free, clattering to the ground. Ethan let out a triumphant breath, shoulders sagging with relief. Claire, however, felt only the chill of finality, as though something had shifted in the air the moment the seal broke. He pried the trapdoor open. A wave of air surged upward, thick and stale, carrying the scent of rot and damp earth. Claire staggered back, covering her mouth. "God, Ethan, what is that?" He coughed, fanning the air with his hand. "Years of being sealed up. It's just stale air." Yet even as he spoke, unease flickered in his expression. Together they peered into the darkness below. Wooden steps descended into a cellar barely visible, the shadows swallowing the light that spilled from above. Against the far wall, Claire could just make out the bulky shapes of wooden crates, stacked high and sealed with iron nails. Ethan's voice trembled with excitement. "Look at that, prohibition stash maybe. This could be incredible." Claire shook her head, her skin prickling. "No. We don't even know if those stairs are safe. Please, Ethan, not now." He rested a hand on her arm, his tone softer. "We don't have to go down yet, but at least it's open. At least we know it's real." Still, Claire couldn't bring herself to step closer. She remained rooted near the bar, watching the yawning black mouth of the cellar with dread. Every instinct told her that whatever lay beneath had not welcomed their intrusion. Ethan, however, crouched near the opening like a man staring at treasure just beyond his reach. His breath was quick, his eyes bright, his curiosity sharper than ever. Claire finally whispered, her voice almost breaking, "Ethan, what if we've just made a mistake we can't undo?" The cellar gave no answer, only the echo of silence, deep, cold, and waiting. The cellar stayed unopened for most of the day. Even Ethan, eager as he was, admitted the air below needed to clear before they ventured down. They kept busy upstairs, cleaning tables and polishing wood, but Claire's eyes drifted constantly to the yawning hole in the floor, its darkness like an unblinking eye watching them both. By late afternoon, Ethan could no longer resist. He tied a bandana over his nose, grabbed a lantern, and tested the first wooden step. It creaked but held. Claire stood at the top, clutching the railing with white knuckles. "Please be careful," she whispered. "I will," Ethan assured her, descending slowly into the gloom. His lantern swung, casting shaky light over stone walls and rows of crates. The smell of earth and mildew thickened as he moved further inside. Dust motes shimmered in the narrow beam. Claire finally gathered her courage and followed, each step sending vibrations through the old wood. Her breath quickened, heart hammering louder than her footsteps. When she reached the bottom, the lantern light revealed details that made her shiver. Iron nails sealed the crates tight, and strange black stains marked the edges of some. Ethan crouched near one, running his hand over the wood. "Look at these, still solid after all these years. Whatever's inside could be worth a fortune." Claire shook her head. "Or it could be nothing but rot. Let's not open them yet." But her attention was drawn to something else. On a small table pushed against the far wall sat a leather-bound book, its cover warped and cracked with age. Dust coated it like a second skin. She picked it up gently. The leather felt oddly warm beneath her palms, as though it had been waiting for her touch. She flipped it open, the pages brittle but still intact, filled with neat handwriting in black ink. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You need to see this." He joined her, peering over her shoulder as she turned the pages. Names filled the lines, long lists of men, women, even children, each followed by dates and numbers. Some entries carried strange symbols, others sharp notations like paid, settled, or worse, gone. Ethan's brows furrowed in fascination. "It's a ledger. Transactions, debts. This proves the saloon wasn't just for drinking and gambling." But it was a front for something bigger. Claire's stomach twisted as she flipped further. The handwriting grew erratic on some pages, scrawled in haste. Whole lines of names were crossed out with thick black ink, and near the back, She found a chilling note written across 2 pages. Debts settled in the cellar, none leave unpaid. Her breath caught. Ethan, this isn't business. This is evidence, he interrupted, his voice tinged with excitement. Proof of how they operated. If this belonged to the Callahan gang, historians would kill to study it. This could change everything we know about the Prohibition era. Claire snapped the ledger shut, hugging it to her chest. Or it could be proof of something worse. People went missing, Ethan. What if these weren't just debts, but lives? The cellar seemed to grow colder around them, the silence pressing heavier. Ethan touched her arm, trying to calm her. We don't know that yet, but we will. This is history, Claire. Ugly, maybe, but history all the same. Claire wanted to argue, wanted to tell him they should leave the book where it lay. But as she looked back at the crates stacked like silent witnesses, she felt the weight of countless untold stories pressing against her chest. And though the lantern's glow flickered bravely against the dark, it wasn't enough to erase the feeling that the ledger had just opened a door neither of them would be able to close. The ledger lay between them on the cellar table, its cracked leather cover now dusted clean by Claire's trembling hands. She had set it down as though it might burn her if she held it too long. Ethan hovered nearby, still leaning into the lantern's glow, his fascination undimmed. But Claire couldn't shake the weight of what they had uncovered. Her gaze drifted from the book to the walls. That was when she noticed them, small iron rings bolted into the stone at shoulder height. Rusted, yes, but unmistakable, and beneath them, faint scratches carved into the rock, shallow yet desperate, as though made by fingernails long ago. Her throat tightened. Ethan, she whispered, pointing. He followed her eyes, his brow furrowing. He stepped closer, running his fingers over the cold iron. Restraints, he muttered. Or maybe storage hooks, Claire's voice cracked. Those aren't for storage. Look at the marks. Someone tried to claw their way out. The words filled the cellar like smoke, heavy and choking. Ethan pulled his hand back, his face momentarily paling, but quickly he straightened, forcing composure. We don't know for sure. You can't just assume. Don't you see it? Claire cut in, her voice rising. The ledger, the crates, the shackles. This wasn't just a saloon, it was a prison. People were kept down here. They died down here. The lantern light trembled as her grip shook, shadows stretching across the walls like the very ghosts of those who had once been chained. Ethan opened one of the crates with the crowbar, the wood groaning as nails bent free. Inside, instead of bottles or goods, they found torn fabric, a pair of boots, and a rusted chain coiled like a snake. Ethan's breath hitched. He reached for the fabric, holding it up. It was a dress tattered and stained, its color long faded. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Tell me that doesn't prove it. For once, Ethan had no quick response. He stared at the dress in silence, his earlier confidence crumbling. The cellar's air pressed down on him, thick with a history he could no longer romanticize. Claire wiped her eyes, her voice trembling but resolute. Ethan, this isn't about uncovering history anymore. It's about disturbing it. These walls were never meant to be reopened. He set the fabric back into the crate, his hands unsteady. You might be right, he admitted, though the words seemed torn from him. But if we walk away now, the truth stays buried. People deserve to know what happened here. Claire's eyes met his, raw with fear and exhaustion. And what about us? What if digging too deep destroys us before anyone else ever hears that truth? The silence that followed was deafening. The lantern hissed faintly, the only sound in the suffocating dark. Ethan closed the crate slowly, his jaw clenched, his inner battle written plainly across his face. At last, he whispered, more to himself than to her. What have we gotten ourselves into? The cellar seemed to answer with silence, heavy and absolute, as though holding its secrets tighter still. Claire turned toward the stairs, desperate for air, her chest tight with dread. But even as they climbed back into the light of the saloon, the shadows of what they had found clung to them, heavier than the desert heat. And deep inside, both of them knew, nothing in Dry Creek would ever feel the same again. The following day, the saloon felt different. Sunlight spilled through its cracked windows, but it did little to lift the weight pressing down on Ethan and Claire. The cellar remained open, its shadow stretching across the floor like a scar. Neither of them spoke of it that morning. Instead, Claire brewed coffee over a small camping stove, while Ethan sat hunched at the table, the ledger open before him. His eyes scanned each page with obsessive intensity, lips moving silently as he traced the entries with his finger. Claire watched him, unease hardening in her chest. "Ethan, maybe we should stop," she said softly. "Close the trapdoor, leave it alone. This doesn't feel like something we're supposed to carry." He didn't look up. "We can't stop now. Don't you see what this means? This ledger is proof of how Callahan ran his operation. Historians have speculated for years, but this—" He tapped the brittle pages. "This is evidence." Claire crossed her arms, trying to steady her voice. "Evidence of what? That people disappeared? That debts were settled in the cellar? You're chasing history, but I'm starting to think it's chasing us." At last, he lifted his gaze, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "Claire, this could rewrite the narrative of prohibition in Nevada." Dry Creek wasn't just a mining town that dried up. It was a hub for organized crime. Callahan wasn't just a saloon owner. He was running a prison beneath his bar. The conviction in his voice chilled her. She stepped closer, placing a hand over the book. And what if that truth doesn't want to be told? What if digging it up comes with a cost? Ethan hesitated, then pulled his hand back slowly. He rubbed his temples, sighing. "I can't stop thinking about it. The names, the codes. Some of these people, they were locals, miners, drifters, maybe even families passing through. No one ever knew where they went." Claire swallowed hard, her stomach knotting. "So what do you want to do?" "Research," he said firmly. "We need to know how deep this goes. If we can match these names to missing persons reports, to old newspaper clippings, then we'll know for sure." Reluctantly, Claire agreed to accompany him. They drove into Carson Ridge, where the county archive was tucked away inside a small, brick courthouse. Inside, the air was cool, carrying the smell of paper and ink. Rows of dusty records filled the shelves, their spines cracked from age. For hours, they pored over documents. Ethan flipped through microfilm reels, the glow of the machine illuminating his determined expression. Claire read brittle newspapers, her eyes scanning headlines about bootlegging raids, gang disputes, and unsolved vanishings. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to form. Vincent Red Jack Callahan's name appeared again and again, tied to gambling operations, violent altercations, and rumors of a hidden stronghold. Articles spoke of travelers who vanished on their way through Dry Creek, of miners who quit their jobs without warning, of debts that seemed to vanish from ledgers with no explanation. Claire's voice trembled as she read aloud from one clipping. "June 1923. 2 sisters missing after last being seen near Callahan's Saloon. Authorities offer no comment." She lowered the paper, her hands shaking. "Ethan, these aren't just stories. They're people." His face was pale, but his voice steady. "And now we have proof of where they went." As they left the courthouse that evening, the desert sky blazed orange and red. The town around them bustled with ordinary life. Children riding bikes, neighbors chatting on porches. But to Ethan and Claire, the world felt heavier, darker. For they carried with them not just a ledger, but a truth that connected every missing name to the cellar beneath their saloon, a truth that demanded to be reckoned with. When Ethan and Claire returned to Carson Ridge the next morning, they expected curiosity or even admiration for their discoveries. Instead, they were met with cold stares. As they walked through the general store to pick up groceries, conversations hushed. Eyes followed them, suspicious and sharp, like they carried something unwelcome. Claire clutched a basket to her chest, her voice low. "They know." Ethan glanced around, unsettled but unwilling to admit it. "We haven't told anyone yet." But word traveled fast in towns like this, and Dry Creek's name carried weight heavier than dust and desert wind. At the counter, the young clerk who had once warned Claire refused to meet her eyes. He scanned their items silently, his shoulders tense. Finally, when Ethan reached for the bag, the boy muttered, "You should have left that door shut." Claire froze. "So, you do know," she whispered. The boy swallowed hard, shaking his head, as if regretting he'd spoken at all. "We don't talk about it. Not here. Not anywhere. Just leave it alone before it's too late." Before Ethan could press further, Henry Dawson stepped in from the hardware store next door. His weathered face was tight, his tone clipped. "Miller, a word." Ethan followed him outside, Claire close at his side. The sunlight blazed, but the air between them was ice. Henry folded his arms, his gaze hard. "I told you not to open it. You didn't listen. Now every soul in this town feels the weight of what you stirred up." Ethan bristled. "We found history, Henry. Real evidence. People deserve to know the truth about what happened in Dry Creek." Henry's voice rose, sharp with anger. "Truth? Son, you think people don't already know? We know enough. We know families never saw their kin again. We know men vanished after drinking in that saloon. And we know no good has ever come from dragging those stories back into the light." Claire stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "But shouldn't the truth matter? If there are families out there who never got closure—" Henry cut her off, his eyes filled with something deeper than anger. Fear. "Closure won't bring peace. You'll just rip open wounds that never healed. Let the dead rest, for your sake and ours." Ethan shook his head, refusing to yield. "You can't bury history just because it's ugly." Henry leaned in, his voice low and cold. "And you can't fight the weight of a town that doesn't want you here. Take my advice. Seal that cellar back up, pack your things, and leave Dry Creek before you regret ever stepping foot in it." For a moment, no one spoke. The wind stirred dust across the street, rattling an old flag against its pole. Claire's stomach knotted. She saw the townspeople watching from the porches and windows, their eyes heavy with silent warning. She whispered to Ethan, "They don't just want us gone, they're afraid of what we've found." Ethan's jaw tightened, his pride refusing to bend. "Let them be afraid. Fear doesn't erase the past." Henry's expression darkened. "No, but it has a way of swallowing the living along with the dead." He turned sharply and walked away, leaving Ethan and Claire standing in the sun, the weight of the townspeople's stares pressing down on them. Claire gripped Ethan's arm, her heart pounding. "Ethan," she said, barely breathing the words, "what if they're right?" Ethan didn't answer. His silence was louder than any promise he could have made. Back in Dry Creek, the saloon no longer felt like a project. It felt like a battleground. Claire sensed it in every creak of the wood, every gust of wind rattling the shutters. She moved through the rooms with her chest tight, her ears tuned to the smallest sound, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Ethan tried to mask his unease with work. He catalogued the ledger entries, photographed the cellar, and typed notes late into the night, his laptop screen casting a pale glow across his tired face. But his drive carried an edge now, as if the warnings had only sharpened his determination. Then the sabotage began. It started small, tools misplaced, screws missing from the boxes they'd left neatly stacked. At first, Ethan brushed it off. "We're tired. We probably forgot where we left things." But Claire noticed the pattern. The crowbar vanished one evening, only to reappear the next morning leaning against the trapdoor. A window cracked in the night, glass scattered across the dusty floor, though no stone lay nearby. One morning, Claire stepped outside to find their truck's tires slashed. The desert wind hissed through the rubber, the sound sharp and final. She called for Ethan, her voice trembling. He stormed out, eyes blazing. "Someone doesn't want us here." Claire's pulse raced. "Ethan, maybe they're right. Maybe we should go." "No," he snapped, his voice hard. Then, softening, he added, "That's exactly what they want. They're trying to scare us into leaving before we can expose the truth." Claire wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the silent town beyond. "Or maybe they're trying to protect us from something worse." That night, they argued. Claire begged him to reconsider, her voice breaking with fear. "You're blind to it, Ethan. This isn't just about history anymore. The townspeople are warning us, and now they're acting on it. What if they do something worse next?" Ethan paced the saloon, fists clenched. "You think I'm blind?" "No, Claire. I see it. I see exactly what's happening. They're terrified the truth will come out because the truth will tarnish this town's legacy. That's why they're fighting us. And if we back down, then everything we've risked will be for nothing." Her eyes filled with tears. "And what about us? What about our safety, our marriage? Is the truth worth losing all of that?" He stopped pacing, his chest heaving, words caught in his throat. For a moment the fire in his eyes dimmed, but then he looked at the ledger on the table, its cracked cover glowing faintly in the lantern light. "Yes," he whispered. The silence that followed was unbearable. Claire turned away, pressing her sleeve to her face. She had never felt so far from him, even while standing in the same room. As she lay awake later, she thought about the locals' eyes, Henry's warnings, and the strange way the saloon seemed alive in the dark. Outside, the desert wind carried sounds she couldn't name. Footsteps, maybe, or whispers caught in the sage. She pulled the blanket tighter, tears dampening the fabric. Ethan lay beside her, his body tense, his eyes still open. His mind was already descending those cellar stairs again, chasing answers he couldn't let go of. And though neither spoke, both knew the same truth. The saloon was no longer just testing their resolve. It was testing the fragile bond holding them together. By the end of the week, tension between Ethan and Claire had become unbearable. Every conversation ended in sharp words or silence. The saloon, once filled with the rhythm of hammers and brushes, now echoed only with unease. Ethan sat at the cellar's edge, the crowbar across his knees, staring into the darkness as though waiting for it to speak. Claire stood near the bar, arms folded, her chest heavy with dread. She finally broke the silence. "Ethan, this has to stop." His jaw tightened. "Stop what? Learning the truth, exposing history?" "No," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Stop losing yourself. You don't see it, but I do. You're not my husband anymore. You're consumed by that hole in the ground. Every word you speak, every breath you take, it's about the cellar, about Callahan, about the past. What about us, Ethan? What about our future?" He looked up at her, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. "I'm doing this for us, don't you understand? If we document everything, if we show the world what we've uncovered, we'll finally have something that matters, something lasting." Claire shook her head, tears brimming. "We already had something lasting, a marriage, a dream we built together. And you're tearing it apart for ghosts that don't care if you ruin yourself." Ethan stood, voice rising with frustration. "It's not ghosts. It's evidence. It's history buried under lies. Don't you see the responsibility we have?" Her anger broke through her fear. "And what about the responsibility you have to me, to us? I didn't come here to dig up bones, Ethan. I came here to build a home with you, to bring life back to this place. But all you've brought into it is death." The words cut deep, and Ethan staggered as though struck. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. The silence was thick, broken only by the low moan of the desert wind through the shutters. Claire wiped her eyes, her voice soft but steady. "I love you, but if you go any further, if you keep dragging us deeper into this, I don't know if I can follow." Ethan's chest heaved. He dropped his gaze to the floor, torn between love and obsession. Then, before he could speak, a sound rose from the cellar. It was faint at first, like the shuffle of feet on stone. Both of them froze. Ethan's eyes snapped to the opening, his breath caught. Claire clutched the edge of the bar, her heart pounding. The sound grew clearer, footsteps, deliberate and slow, echoing up from the dark beneath them. Claire's voice cracked. "Ethan, please tell me that's you." His face was pale, eyes wide. "I'm standing right here." The cellar yawned open, its shadows deeper than before. The footsteps stopped, leaving a silence more terrifying than the sound itself. Claire backed away, her whole body trembling. "We shouldn't have opened it. We should never have opened it." Ethan gripped the crowbar tighter, his knuckles white. "Whatever's down there, we face it together." But his words rang hollow, lost in the oppressive stillness of the saloon. For the first time, Ethan felt the weight of his obsession pressing back against him, not as history but as something alive in the dark, something waiting for them both. The cellar gaped beneath them, its silence louder than any sound. Claire clutched Ethan's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "We can't go down there," she whispered, her voice raw with fear. Ethan's grip tightened on the crowbar. His jaw worked as though grinding stone. "If we walk away now, we'll never know. We'll spend the rest of our lives haunted by questions." Claire's eyes glistened in the dim light. "And if the answers destroy us?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with a shaky breath, he lifted the lantern and stepped onto the first creaking stair. The wood groaned beneath his weight, echoing into the hollow below. Claire cursed under her breath, but followed, unable to let him face the dark alone. The deeper they descended, the heavier the air grew, stale, damp, and suffocating. The lantern's glow reached the floor, revealing the crates stacked against the walls like sentinels. But this time something new caught their eyes, a narrow passageway, half hidden behind a rotting support beam. Ethan's heart pounded. "A tunnel," he muttered, moving closer. Claire grabbed his arm. "Don't. Please, Ethan. This is enough." But he shook her off gently, driven forward. He ducked through the narrow gap, the lantern's light spilling into a chamber beyond. Claire followed reluctantly, her breath shallow. The chamber was small, its stone walls close and damp. In the center lay a collapsed wooden chair, its arms splintered and stained dark. Iron restraints jutted from the stone, thicker than the ones in the main cellar. The floor bore deep grooves, as though something or someone had been dragged across it countless times. Claire pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. My God! Then Ethan's lantern beam caught something else. Along the far wall, bones lay scattered, long femurs, ribs, fragments of skulls. Time had yellowed them, but there was no mistaking what they were. Claire gasped, stumbling backward. "No, no, no!" Ethan's face drained of color. He knelt slowly, his fingers hovering over the remains, but not daring to touch. "It's real," he whispered. "All of it. The ledger. The names. This is where they ended up." Claire's knees gave out, and she sank against the wall, tears streaming. "You wanted the truth, Ethan. Here it is. Are you happy now?" His chest heaved, torn between triumph and horror. "I didn't want this," he said hoarsely. "I wanted history. But this is murder. This is a grave." The chamber seemed to close in around them, the silence pressing like a weight. Claire looked at him, her voice broken. "We have to leave. We have to tell someone. This doesn't belong to us anymore." Ethan nodded, though his eyes lingered on the bones as if still trying to make sense of them. The crowbar slipped from his grasp, clattering against the stone floor, the sound sharp and final. As they turned back toward the passage, Claire whispered, "Do you hear that?" Ethan froze. Faintly, carried through the narrow tunnel, came the sound of footsteps again, slow, deliberate, echoing against the stone. Claire's grip tightened on his arm. Her breath hitched. "We're not alone down here." The lantern flickered, shadows stretching long across the chamber. And in that moment, both of them realized the truth they had uncovered was no longer just written in the ledger or etched in the walls. It was alive in the darkness, and it was aware of them. The footsteps never reached them. They faded into silence as suddenly as they had begun, leaving only the flicker of the lantern and the pounding of their hearts. Neither Ethan nor Claire spoke until they had climbed the stairs, sealing the trapdoor behind them with shaking hands. For a long while they simply stood in the saloon, both breathing hard, both aware they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Claire broke first, her voice raw. "We can't stay here, Ethan, not another night, not after what we saw." Ethan's hands trembled as he set the lantern down. He opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat. Finally, he whispered, "You're right." The admission stunned Claire. She had expected another argument, another defense of history over safety. But instead, Ethan's shoulders slumped, and he looked at her not as a man chasing answers, but as her husband, the man she had once followed into the desert for a dream. "I thought this place would make us whole," he said, voice breaking. "I thought uncovering its story would give us purpose, but it nearly destroyed us, and if we stay, it will." Claire reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. For the first time in weeks, he squeezed back without hesitation. The following day, they drove to Carson Ridge and went straight to the sheriff's office. The man listened quietly as Ethan and Claire recounted what they had found. At first, disbelief shadowed his face, but when they showed him the ledger, his expression hardened. By the time Ethan finished describing the bones in the chamber, the sheriff's voice was grim. "You two did the right thing bringing this here," he said. "That saloon isn't just history. It's a crime scene." An investigation followed swiftly. Law enforcement sealed the building and forensic teams were called in. The cellar, once only a whispered rumor, now stood as undeniable proof of Dry Creek's darkest past. Reports confirmed what Ethan and Claire had already known in their hearts. Callahan's saloon had been more than a gathering place. It had been a prison, a graveyard, and the center of a criminal empire that thrived on silence. Ethan and Claire watched from a distance as officials combed through the site. For the first time, Ethan felt relief in letting go, though part of him mourned the dream that had brought them there. Claire slipped her arm through his, resting her head against his shoulder. "We came here to restore a saloon," she said softly. "Instead, we restored the truth." He kissed the top of her head, his voice steady, "And maybe that's more important than anything I ever imagined." The desert town of Dry Creek would never again be a tourist attraction or a polished restoration. Instead, it would stand as a reminder, a place where silence once hid terrible deeds, and where truth, no matter how dark, refused to stay buried forever. For Ethan and Claire, the experience changed everything. It tested their marriage, their courage, and their limits, but it also forged something stronger between them, an understanding that their bond mattered more than ambition, more than recognition, more than history itself. As they packed their belongings and prepared to leave Nevada behind, Claire took one last look at the horizon, where the ruins of Dry Creek shimmered in the heat. She whispered a quiet farewell, not to the town, but to the ghosts they had finally allowed to rest. Ethan turned the key in the ignition, the truck rumbling to life. "Where to?" he asked with a faint smile. Claire smiled back through tired eyes. "Anywhere but here." The road stretched ahead, endless and open, carrying them away from the weight of the past and toward the fragile promise of a future rebuilt together. And for those of you who have followed their journey, don't forget to subscribe for more stories where forgotten places and hidden truths collide. And if you're ready for another tale, click the video now appearing on your screen. You won't want to miss what comes next,